Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Letter to Vox podcast. Today, we're attempting something of a feat, a deep dive into one of the most, monumental works of 20th century philosophy.
That's putting it lightly. We're talking about Jean Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness.
Exactly. It's a huge book and famously very, very dense.
It is. It was published back in 1943, right in the middle of, a massive existential crisis for all of Europe. And the book is this incredibly intense exploration of what it means to exist.
It's all about radical freedom.
Radical freedom and the crushing responsibility that comes right along with being conscious.
So our mission today is to give you something of an existentialist shortcut. This book is, over 700 pages?
And not easy pages either.
Not at all. So we're here to try and extract the most potent, the most crucial insights for you. We want you to walk away from this with a real fundamental grasp of how Sartre defines existence, the sheer pain of creating yourself, and maybe why our deep desire for connection is, maybe structurally a doomed project.
Right. We're peeling back the layers on these huge concepts like anxiety, desire, human relationships, all things that Sartre addresses with this intense philosophical rigor.
And understanding his framework, I think, means understanding the core claim of existentialism.
Which is that human reality is, by its very nature, an unhappy consciousness. It's forever striving for a state it can never, ever attain.
So let's start with the man himself, the architect of this whole system, Jean Paul Sartre. When you think of him, you immediately think philosopher, but his real ambition was actually a bit broader, wasn't it? He wanted to connect intellectual discipline with literary expression.
Oh, absolutely. Sartre's whole early career was dedicated to uniting literature and philosophy. He called it a concrete technique of expression.
So one provides the method, the other provides the word.
Exactly. For him, philosophy was the rigorous method, but literature was what supplied the vivid, the tangible language you need to really unravel the complex relations between people, things, and, themselves.
It wasn't just building a system.
No, not at all. He was trying to describe life as it is actually lived.
And it's interesting, he felt he did this better in his later works, the ones that weren't strictly philosophy.
That's right. Later in life, he said that even though Being and Nothingness and his critique of dialectical reason were his pure philosophy texts, he felt works like his study of Saint Genet, the criminal saint.
Or that huge biography, L'idiot de la famille.
Exactly. He thought those were more representative of his real goal, which was rendering events in a literary way while still conveying that deep philosophical meaning about freedom and contingency.
It is interesting because the kind of absolute freedom he presents in Being and Nothingness can feel like it clashes with the reality of social conditions.
Yeah.
Did he ever, soften that view?
It wasn't so much a softening as a grounding in reality. After living through all the mid-century political upheavals, he became very aware of the external pressures that shape our lives.
The power of things, right.
Right. In a 1969 interview, he said that life had taught him die Macht der Dinge, the power of things.
So how did he square that? How do you have absolute freedom and social constraints at the same time?
Well, he ultimately defined freedom as, and I'm paraphrasing here, that small movement that makes a completely socially conditioned being into a person who does not, in all aspects, represent what results from his conditionality.
So we're conditioned but not determined.
Precisely. He realized the constraints are real. We're born into a language, a class, a historical moment. We don't choose those things. But freedom is the act of choosing our stance in relation to those constraints.
It's how we give them meaning.
It's how we give them meaning. It's the leap toward a future that transcends our present facts.
Okay, so let's take that core idea and dive into the central framework of the book, this big ontological split between two modes of being.
The being in itself, or l'être en soi, and the being for itself, l'être pour soi.
Let's start with the in itself. What is that?
The being in itself is, it's the realm of fixed objects. It's the things around us. The simplest definition is that it is what it is.
Total identity.
Total identity. It's absolutely positive, completely filled with itself. Think of a rock, a chair, the sound of the wind. They're opaque to themselves because they don't have that inner distance that consciousness provides. They just are.
And their existence is fundamentally kind of unreasonable.
Exactly. It's uncreated. There's no reason for it to exist, and you can't derive it from any kind of logical possibility or necessity. This lack of a logical foundation is what he calls its contingency.
A thing doesn't have to be possible, it just is.
Right. Necessity is a link between ideas, not a quality of existence itself.
And this leads to that almost visceral feeling that the world is just too much.
Yes. The in itself is superfluous, de trop, as he says, for eternity. Consciousness, when it looks at this raw, brute fact of existence, it recognizes that you can't derive this being from anything else. It's just radically, overwhelmingly present. No explanation, no foundation, just pure, stubborn fact.
Okay, so that's the fixed positive being. Now
Okay.
let's contrast that with the being for itself, which is where we, as conscious beings, reside.
The for itself is the very structure of human reality, and it's defined by a contradiction. It is the being who is what he is not and who is not what he is.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but it's crucial. Unlike a fixed object, a human being is always in process. We're constantly making ourselves. We have to be. Our present only gets its meaning from the future we're projecting ourselves toward.
So if the in itself is fullness, the for itself is defined by a lack.
It is the annihilation of being in itself. Consciousness is a lack of being. It's a relation to a transcendent being, the world, and its very existence is that of immediate self-consciousness. It's the distance that the rock lacks.
But, and this is critical, it's not some abstraction floating in a void.
No, not at all. It's radically dependent on the in itself. We are always the consciousness of something. Think of it like a shadow. A shadow can't exist if it's a shadow of nothing, right? It needs an object.
That makes sense. And this structure of consciousness, this immediate self-awareness, that's what leads him to his ideas on the ego, the I, and the me.
Sartre gets very specific here. The ego, the I, and the me, they aren't some deep inner substance. He sees them as transcendent objects. They're ideal unities that we create through reflection.
They exist outside of our immediate moment-to-moment consciousness.
Exactly. The ego is, to our psychic states, what the world is to physical objects. Both are just perceived as these ideal totalities that give coherence to everything.
So the I and me are just conceptual handles we use to organize ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. The I is the ideal unity of our actions. I act. And the me is the ideal unity of our states and qualities. Me is happy, me is tired. They're useful concepts for sure, but they are outside the immediate, flowing, non-mirtholetic consciousness that actually constitutes the feeling of pleasure or pain itself.
Right. Let's move on to the concept that really structures this entire book. Nothingness. Sartre's big claim is that man is the being by whom nothingness comes into the world.
This is a huge challenge to the entire philosophical tradition. Sartre believed that thinkers before him, like Hegel or Heidegger, they talked about nothingness as this abstract concept, but they never rooted it in the actual being that brings it about.
Which for him is human consciousness.
Human consciousness. Nothingness, for Sartre, is real. It's a feature of the world we live in, but only because we have the power to transcend and negate things.
How can we see this in a tangible, real-world way?
The famous cafe anecdote is perfect for this. You walk into a cafe expecting to meet your friend Pierre, but he isn't there.
Okay.
Now, his absence isn't just a thought in your head. Sartre insists it's an objective fact, a real event that restructures your entire perception of the room.
I see the whole cafe, but I'm seeing it as the cafe without Pierre.
Exactly. You are performing what he calls the intuitive apprehension of a double annihilation. First, the cafe itself, the ground, is sort of annihilated to allow the figure Pierre's absence to stand out. And second, that figure, the absence itself, is a perpetual disappearance that's slipping across the background of the cafe.
The absence is a negation that's founded in my expectation, in my being.
That's the key. If you hadn't expected to see Pierre, you wouldn't be registering his absence as a real negation. If you didn't expect to see the King of Sweden, his non-presence is just an abstract logical fact. It's existentially meaningless.
So this power of negation is just inherent to consciousness.
It is. And it's also fundamental to how we interact with the world through destruction.
What do you mean?
Well, he says destruction is an essentially human thing. Nature can cause damage, a storm can wreck a city, but only a person can truly destroy. The meaning of a destroyed city depends on the prior human creation of the city.
And the protective measures that define the event as destructive in the first place.
Right. Destruction always presupposes that you already have a prejudicative comprehension of nothingness. The idea of a not city or a broken thing has to be there first.
So if the for itself is defined by this power of negation, this constant lack, then its defining characteristic has to be freedom. But a kind of freedom that is, well, terrifying.
It is terrifying, absolute freedom. It's scary because consciousness is perpetually not enough. It has an insufficiency of being. If we were a full being, fixed like a rock, we'd be defined by a past essence. But since we're defined by a gap, By nothingness, we're perpetually free to choose our relationship to the world and to ourselves.
Existence precedes essence.
That's the mantra. We create ourselves moment by moment.
And this freedom is maintained by the nothingness we secrete between any motive and any act.
Yes, there is always a nothingness separating the motive from the act. A motive, whether it's a desire, a trauma, a historical event, it only becomes a motive when the annihilating power of consciousness decides it is one.
The project of an action comes first.
It does. The project structures your perception of the motive. Think of a historical choice, like Clovis converting to Christianity. The state of the Western Church didn't cause his conversion. It only appeared as a powerful motive through his fundamental project, which was imposing his rule on Gaul.
The political project gives the religious landscape its power as a motive.
Precisely. The freedom to choose is what gives the motive its gravity.
And the subjective internal experience of this absolute responsibility. This is anguish.
Anguish is the recognition that nothing, no external force, no internal psychological drive can determine us. The classic example he gives is standing at a precipice.
Right.
You feel horror, you feel the instinct of self-preservation, but in the moment of anguish, you realize these are not determinants. There are only possibilities. You are still absolutely free to choose the opposite, to throw yourself over.
So I apprehend my horror, but I'm also conscious that this horror isn't strong enough to actually stop me. I still have to choose to sustain my desire to live.
Exactly. Anguish reveals that the for itself is totally free. You can't derive the meaning of the world or the power of your motives from anything outside of yourself. You, the individual, have to perpetually remake yourself, sustaining every single value and every decision you make.
It reveals the self as this continuous, unfinished process, a self you can never really grab hold of.
You can never possess it or fix it.
But what if I've chosen to be a coward my entire life? Doesn't that past weigh on my present choice? It feels psychologically almost impossible to just be totally free from that.
And that's the core conflict. Sartre absolutely accepts the weight of the past, what he calls our facticity, but we are still free to choose our relation to it. The past is what I have to be, but it does not determine what I must choose now.
So if you've been a coward,
If you've been a coward, you must now choose to take that cowardly past and transcend it with a new project. If you choose to say, I am just defined by my past cowardice, that is itself a choice. It's a choice to give up your present freedom.
and that choice to deny your own freedom is what he calls bad faith.
Bad faith. It's the fundamental attempt to flee the intolerable burden of anguish and absolute freedom, is trying to treat yourself as if you were in itself a fixed, determined thing, like a rock. We try to become our own fixed nature, denying our own transcendence.
And the most common way to do that is to embrace psychological determinism.
Right. Before it's even a theory in a book, determinism is an attitude of excuse. It tries to reestablish those comforting, fixed causal links between the past and the present that freedom has shattered.
By saying, I couldn't help it, or it's just my nature.
Exactly. You claim that force is comparable to things like libido, hidden traumas, drives, exist inside you and compel you. You're denying the radical transcendence of your own reality. It's reassuring because it makes you a necessary consequence, and it eliminates that terrifying moment of free choice.
But Sartre goes even further. He challenges a really deeply held moral concept. Sincerity. Why is trying to be your true self a form of bad faith?
This is a tricky one. Sincerity is the attempt to determine exactly what I am, to nail down an essence. By saying, I am a lazy person or I am a heterosexual man, I'm constituting myself as a thing, and in doing so, I'm denying my present freedom.
They're forgetting that those drives are only realized with your consent.
Precisely. We lend them their power by a perpetually renewed free decision about their value. The moment I affirm that I am what I was, I'm trying to fix my nature, but the instant someone else holds me to that definition.
Like calling you out for being cowardly.
Right. You immediately reassert your freedom. You say, I can no longer be what I was. Sincerity tries to cover up the fact that the past is something that our present, by definition, is not subject to.
So the paradox of authenticity is that sincerity has to be in bad faith.
It has to be, because human reality is structurally defined as being what it is not and not being what it is. I am not my past, but I have to be it. I'm not my current quality, but I have to transcend it. The moment I try to just be that quality, I have lied about my freedom.
This whole structure, it hinges on consciousness being this unified, self-aware lack, which naturally leads to Sartre's very famous critique of the unconscious.
Right. Traditional psychoanalysis, with its duality of the eye holding the truth and the conscious mind being unaware, had to invent a middleman.
It's the censor.
The censor, this mechanism that's supposed to hide the truth from the conscious mind. But the problem is obvious, isn't it?
The hider has to know what it's hiding.
Right. The very act of concealment implies a single psychic mechanism that has a double activity. It has to locate the thing to be concealed, the truth of the desire or trauma, and at the same time, it has to repress it. So if the censor is doing the repressing, the censor itself has to be conscious of both the truth and the lie.
So psychoanalysis just localized the contradiction. It didn't solve it.
It established an autonomous consciousness in bad faith on the level of the censor. The fundamental question, how can I hide something from myself if I am a unified consciousness? It's not solved. It just became what he called mere verbal terminology. The responsibility for deception, just like the responsibility for freedom, remains unitary and squarely on the self.
Before we move on to how this free consciousness encounters the world through its body, we need to take a quick moment.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this podcast.
Welcome back. Okay, so we've established the self as this absolute freedom, a pure self-conscious lack. Now, how does that void actually interact with the concrete world?
It has to, and it does so through the body. For Sartre, the body is the primary facticity of our consciousness.
It's the ultimate contingent fact about us.
Exactly. The upsurge of the for itself doesn't just happen to a body. The upsurge itself causes the world to exist as a totality of things, and it causes the senses to exist as the objective mode in which those things are presented to us.
So my senses aren't just passive data collectors, they're actively shaping my world.
They are. Think about something like myopia or Daltonism colorblindness. Those conditions don't just change what I see, they define the entire way there is a world for me. They define the facticity of my upsurge. My body, the body for me, is a center of reference that organizes my entire experience.
I find his discussion of physical pain really illuminating here. It shows the difference between unreflective existence and self-conscious reflection.
It's a great example. When we're in pain, unreflective consciousness just lives that pain as the body. It's this immediate, all-consuming experience. But the moment reflection kicks in, we constitute that raw pain as an illness.
The illness becomes a thing in itself.
The transcendent entity. It has a form, a rhythm, an identity that goes beyond the raw sensation. And this illness is then sustained by what he calls the psychic body.
Okay, this is a pretty abstract concept. Can we unpack that a little? The psychic body.
The psychic body is our underlying reservoir of passivity and contingency. It's the projection in itself of the brute fact of our pains, our vulnerabilities, our physical limits. It's not a separate mental structure like the ego. It's the body insofar as it is suffered by consciousness.
But I don't know it in a cognitive way. I suffer it. It's like the constant background noise of my physical existence.
Precisely. It's effectively apprehended. When we're ill, we direct our conscious projects, our freedom toward the illness. We hate it. We seek a cure. We endure it. The raw pain is the matter, and the psychic body is the passive environment where the illness takes shape, always reminding us of our facticity.
What about the project of suffering itself? Why do we suffer?
Well, the ultimate goal of suffering, paradoxically, is to create a fixed, silent, opaque entity. He calls it a statue in itself of suffering.
We want our suffering to become a fixed object.
Right, like the pain of a martyr or a monument. But because we're the for itself, we have to constantly raise that suffering into existence through our own spontaneity, which means it's always escaping us.
We groan, we wail, we express it so that our external gestures become infused with the suffering in itself that we can never truly be.
Yes, and that statue of suffering can only exist through and for others. We seek external validation, the recognition that our suffering is real, monumental, fixed. Our suffering suffers from being what it is not, the fixed statue, and from not being what it is, pure, silent being.
This links our most intimate physical experiences directly back to that alienation caused by the other's look, which we will get to. But first, another irreducible facticity: temporality and the past. The past seems like the ultimate in itself, doesn't it? Fixed and totally beyond our reach.
The past is indeed what the for itself has to be. It's irremediable, it haunts us from a distance, but it's crucial to remember that the past isn't determined by some endless chain of prior events. It exists as the function of a certain being which I am. My past is originally the past of this present.
So if I make a radical decision now, like to resign from a job, I have to first recognize that this decision is born out of the particular past I'm trying to destroy.
That's the mechanism. Through the past, the for itself is transformed into an in itself. It's revealed as being in the midst of the world, having lost its transcendence. This is where objective time and my own personal temporality meet. The past is the only temporal dimension where I belong to universal public time.
But the present and the future are how we escape that fixed timeline.
Right. When we choose, we perpetually recover our prior choice, but we also have the power to objectify our immediate past, evaluate it, and take our bearings in relation to it. And this act of objectivizing the past, it helps cause the instant to spring forth as annihilating rupture, a radical break where the old causality is rejected for a new projection.
This brings us to a really crucial distinction he makes: finitude versus death. People often use those words interchangeably, but Sartre separates them completely.
They have to be radically separated. Finitude is an ontological structure. It results directly from free choice. Human reality would be finite even if we were immortal, because the act of freedom is the assumption and creation of finitude.
When I choose one thing, I exclude all the other possibilities.
Exactly. When you choose option A, you irrevocably exclude options B, C, and D. You are born with multiple possibilities, and you make yourself one unique being through your choices. Your uniqueness is born of your choice, not your mortality.
So then death, conversely, is just a contingent fact.
It's a contingent fact, belonging entirely to facticity, just like your birth or the color of your hair. It happens within time. It's not a possible that can be freely chosen, except in very specific cases like suicide or martyrdom, where the choice is really about the meaning of the act, not the metaphysical fact of mortality.
And the most tragic consequence of this contingent end is that it totally fixes us.
It's alienating. Death turns the for itself into a pure past, an in itself. And crucially, the meaning of your life is then determined and sustained only as others are interested in interpreting it. Death fixes our being for others irremediably. You are eternally the object you were for them. He completely rejects any notion of being unto death because death is an external fact that arrives from the outside. It's not an inner possibility that shapes our freedom.
So we're radically free, structurally incomplete, and inevitably facing this contingent, alienating end. And we had to share this existence with other consciousnesses. So now we enter the realm of being for others.
And the existence of the other is not something we can deduce. It's a contingent and irreducible fact we just encounter. We can't logically construct another consciousness. Their presence just deepens our facticity. Our existence in the world is now existence in the presence of others.
And the initial relationship is one of mutual refusal.
The self is constituted as myself through the refusal of the other. I am the one who is not the other. And this internal negative relation is reciprocal. Because the other is also a formery for itself, defined by choice and negation, the other is a self who also refuses me.
I can't fully grasp a consciousness that doesn't, in turn, grasp me.
Right, and the mechanism by which the other reveals themselves is the look.
The look. This is the big ontological jolt.
It is. Apprehending a look is not seeing physical eyes. It is to be conscious of being looked at. The look is on me without distance, yet it holds me at a distance because I can't grasp the subject who is looking. The world I was organizing collapses, and now it's being organized and structured by the other.
And this look forces my objectivation. I am reduced from a free subject to a fixed thing. And this is the origin of shame.
The look reveals my being as object, my transcendence as transcended. My pure, flowing interiority is seized and fixed by the other's gaze. I am ashamed because I recognize that I am as the other sees me. Shame is immediate recognition. It proves the other's existence and my object status at the same time.
This me as object, this public self, it becomes an inaccessible, fixed essence.
It's an unknowable being, an unjustifiable being in itself, an inert presence among other objects in the other's world. The other holds a secret, the secret of what I am. I'm responsible for my being for others, but the other is its foundation. I am possessed.
This alienation is what he calls the original fall, and it leads to existential guilt.
And this guilt is structural, not moral. I feel guilty because I made an object by another, stripped of my interiority, but I'm also guilty because I inevitably turn the tables. I cannot live without causing the other to experience this exact same alienation by making them an object.
Transcending their transcendence.
Right. This is the fundamental violence in all human interaction. We're condemned to this structural conflict. Either I make the other an object, or the other makes me an object.
So because the other possesses the key to my object being, our fundamental projects and relationships are basically futile attempts to recover that essence. Let's start with love.
The project of love is the attempt to absorb the other's freedom, to internalize the system by which the other validates my being as object. We want the beloved to freely choose to found our essence, to give us ontological proof that we are justified in existing.
But it's a futile attempt because freedom can't be possessed or commanded.
The beloved cannot will to love. The moment their love becomes a fixed object and necessitated essence, it ceases to be the free act we desired in the first place. Love is basically indistinguishable from seduction. We offer up our object state to the other in the hope of appropriating their freedom, but they always remain an irreducible subject, perpetually escaping us.
Okay, so next, desire. This seems to bypass that intellectual conflict by plunging into the material reality of the body.
Desire is a radical modification of the for itself, where consciousness becomes clogged by its facticity. It's lived purely as flesh. The world recedes as a set of instruments and becomes ensnaring, tactile, revealing objects by their matter, their texture, their flesh.
The goal is this reciprocity of incarnation.
Yes. The caress is an attempt to impregnate the other's body with consciousness and freedom, hoping to be seen as flesh by the other's flesh. It's an attempt at a dual shared passivity.
But desire fails precisely when the lover reverts to being an instrument.
The failure happens the moment the lover shifts from the caress, that sustained state of pure touch, to the act of taking and appropriating. The instant I try to seize or possess the other's body, my own body stops being flesh and reverts to being a synthetic instrument capable of action. The other instantly becomes an object again, and the reciprocal incarnation is broken.
So if love and desire fail, the final attempt to resolve this alienation is the extreme reaction, hate.
Hate is the ultimate project of despair. It's the free determination to suppress the other's consciousness entirely, to abolish one's alienated being as object. The hater wants to create a world where the other does not exist.
But the tragic flaw in hate is that it transforms into failure the moment it succeeds.
Correct. Even if the hater kills the other, he cannot bring it about that the other had not been. What I was for the other immediately slips into the past and becomes an irremediable dimension of myself. The other's death fixes me as an irremediable object, exactly as my own death would.
Given this structural conflict, what about moments of shared collective experience? The we subject.
Sartre is very critical of the experience of the we. He argues it's a pure psychological subjective event that happens solely within a single consciousness. When you use an elevator, for instance, you make yourself anybody, an experience of undifferentiated transcendence. You feel like an anonymous, interchangeable part of a crowd.
So it's an internal feeling, not a true mid-sane, a genuine being with others.
Exactly. The subjectivities are still radically separated and out of reach. We only feel supported by others through our relation to things and bodies. And crucially, true collective action, or the feeling of us, often only happens in response to a third party.
How does that third party create a we?
Well, the primary mechanism is the creation of the US object. Think of a group of oppressors. They only truly experience themselves as a collective us when they face the oppressed class, which acts as they who look at. The oppressors see themselves, through the eyes of the fearful or shamed oppressed, as a single, unified, fearful force. The we is a structural defense against being reduced to an object. It's unstable, it's psychological, and it doesn't overcome the original conflict.
Okay, so we have all the pieces. The free for itself, the fixed in itself, and the inevitable conflict of the look. Now, Sartre brings these together in the concept of the situation.
The situation is the core relational structure of existence. It's the complex relationship between my free for itself and the in itself, my body, my environment, my past, that I am perpetually annihilating. The formulation sums it all up. I am absolutely free and absolutely responsible for my situation, but I am never free except in situation.
So freedom isn't an abstract capacity to do anything I want. It's only exercised within the constraints that I must choose to give meaning to.
The situation is the totality of my facticity, my place, my birth, the existence of others, plus my unlimited freedom, which causes this facticity to become a world for me. It's a dialectic.
This means that even the resistance of things, what he calls adversity, isn't a danger to freedom. It actually enables it to arise.
The resistance of things is illuminated and given meaning by the end I have chosen. If I choose to climb a mountain, the rock face is hard. Its hardness isn't a threat to my freedom, it's the material condition for my freedom to even arise. If my tire punctures, that flat tire instantly transforms the distance to town, from revolutions of wheels to steps.
My freedom is ultimately responsible for the fact that there are things with their own indifference and unpredictability.
Precisely. The free project causes things to manifest themselves as independent realities with a coefficient of adversity and also utilizable instrumentality. The nothingness I secrete between myself and the world defines things as resistant entities that I must freely transcend.
And this applies to personal characteristics we're born with, like race or infirmity, which are also part of our facticity.
Yes. Race, infirmity, or ugliness can only appear with a meaning that my freedom confers on them. A person's being a Jew, for example, is nothing outside the free manner of adopting it, whether that's pride, shame, indifference, or using it as a shield. He calls this an elective assumption. I am condemned to choose how I will be what I am for the other.
Given this absolute freedom operating within a fixed situation, Sartre then proposes a radically new method for understanding human action: existential psychoanalysis.
This is his alternative to Freudian analysis. It has to be based on the fundamental choice of being, which is unique, concrete, and irreducible. It doesn't look for abstract complexes or libido. It looks for the single original way the person has chosen their being.
Which is always fundamentally a choice of trying to become God.
A choice to become the in itself for itself, yes.
So instead of seeing a neurosis as a trauma that happened to someone, Sartre views it as a continuous, active choice.
That is the crucial distinction. Let's use his example of the inferiority complex. Most people see this as a mental state that happened to them, maybe because of childhood trauma. Sartre views it as chosen as an instrument to attain certain ends.
The main end being to get rid of the anguishing burden of freedom.
Right, by making oneself comparable to a fixed thing. The man who suffers from this has chosen to be his own tormentor. He actively chooses to produce and assume the shame and despair necessary to realize that humiliation. It's a free apprehension of our being for others. The complex is the means by which you will to escape your own freedom.
Which makes the complex not a deficiency, but an active, profound, and continuous act of self-constitution.
It's the ultimate choice, the choice of being. The analyst's job is to rediscover this fundamental choice, this original project that organizes all subsequent behavior.
And now we arrive at the metaphysical summit, the ultimate reason for all this ceaseless striving and the source of our unhappiness, the impossibility of self-foundation.
The ultimate ideal being, the perfect synthesis that all human endeavor is fundamentally directed toward, is the ens causa sui, the self-cause, which of course takes on the name of God.
This ideal being would have the full positivity of the in itself and the self-consciousness of the for itself.
Right, it would be its own foundation and fully conscious of that foundation.
And since the in itself and the for itself are structurally contradictory, one is fullness, one is lack, this ideal is completely unattainable.
Human reality is defined as a perpetual project of founding itself qua being, and at the same time, a perpetual failure of this project. The moment we try to solidify our being and become in itself, we cease to be free consciousness. We're chasing a structural contradiction.
This futile pursuit is the ontological condition of mankind.
Yes, and this pursuit means human reality is, by nature, an unhappy consciousness with no possibility of surpassing its unhappy state. Our being is perpetually defined by this lack of being, which we are constantly trying to fill through projects like doing and significantly having.
I think we need to connect that idea of having directly back to the listener's experience. How does this abstract pursuit of godhood show up in our drive for, say, material gain or a promotion?
The desire to have is fundamentally inseparable from the desire to be. Our relationship with objects, what he calls appropriation, is the symbol of the ens causa sui. When I possess an object, a car, a house, a reputation, a legacy, I apprehend myself as the foundation of its being. I'm trying to recover an object being that's identical to my fixed being for others.
So possession gives me a momentary external solidity.
Exactly. What is mine is myself in a non-subjective fixed form. I enjoy my transient being in itself, and I acquire a defense against others. The drive for wealth, fame, or legacy are just specific, measurable manifestations of the metaphysical failure to become God. They're attempts to acquire the fixed, justified existence that consciousness perpetually lacks.
So, the mortgage you strive for, the promotion you seek, the legacy you want to build, Sartre is saying these are just attempts to possess a non-subjective fixed form of your being, trying to acquire the being that consciousness, by its very definition, can never possess.
They are the symbolic interpretations of the same fundamental situation, the structural lack of being which I make myself be.
That was an extraordinary journey through the deep and often tragic logic of Jean Paul Sartre. Let's try to leave you with, say, the 5 central takeaways from Being and Nothingness.
Okay. First, the ontological split. The world is divided into the fixed, opaque, and contingent in itself, and the for itself consciousness, which is defined as annihilation, a conscious lack, making it fluid and transcendent.
Second, because man brings nothingness into the world, we are condemned to absolute freedom. There's always a nothingness separating motive from act, making us fully responsible for every single choice.
Third, this absolute freedom creates anguish, and our primary mode of flight is bad faith, the self-deception of trying to treat ourselves as a fixed object. This is also why sincerity is a form of bad faith.
Fourth, the other's look fixes us as an object. This leads to existential guilt and inevitable structural conflict in all human relations. Love, desire, and hate are all doomed projects aimed at recovering the essence the other possesses.
And finally, the fundamental human project is the futile attempt to become the ens causa sui God. This structural failure means human reality is an unhappy consciousness condemned to ceaseless striving.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought. If the drive to acquire or achieve is just the symbolic expression of that futile desire to be a self-caused God, then look at the things you feel compelled to possess. Your achievements, your titles, your material possessions. Are they goals in themselves, or are they, at a deeper level, simply attempts to acquire the fixed, durable being that consciousness perpetually lacks? An attempt to make yourself, finally, unsuperfluous.
The challenge remains to live freely in the face of this constitutive lack without retreating into the bad faith of possession or a fixed essence.
A profound thought to carry into your week. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more insights from the cutting edge of complexity.